listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hi, my name is Barbara Mendes-Jorge, and I'm a sustainability communications expert based in Brussels, Belgium. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Let's Talk Sustainable Business, a series brought to you by the Conference Board. This is the second installment of our two-part episode with sustainable finance and investment expert Marilyn Waite. If you haven't listened to part one yet, please do go back in our catalogue to listen to it first. So welcome back, Marilyn.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Glad to have you. So, at the end of part one, you started talking about the ESRS, and we discussed the different strands of ESG. And I wanted to talk to you about the fact that you were previously on the board of EFRAG, which is the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. And they advise the European Commission on the CSRD, which you mentioned, and the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which are going to impact companies with more than 50,000 employees on their sustainability reporting. So I wanted to hear a little bit more on what your role was at EFRAG and how you worked on these issues when you were there.
So I was on the administrative board of EFRAG. There are a few layers to the governance. Governance has been in place, I think, for 18 months or so. However, it is not fully, I would say, balanced when it comes to sustainability expertise. But essentially, EFRAG never had a mandate to develop sustainability reporting standards. It had a strictly financial accounting mandate before in terms of interpreting international financial reporting standards into kind of European regulatory advice. And as the European Union system was, convinced to have a set of European sustainability reporting standards, they requested EFRAG to take on that task of not just interpreting any kind of international standards, but also developing from scratch, quote unquote, sustainability reporting standards. So EFRAG has this new mandate. So there's an overall administrative board right now, and then there's a sustainability reporting board, and then there's a technical expert group for sustainability. The two layers that have sustainability explicit, so the sustainability reporting board and the technical expert group, they are appointed by the administrative board. So the administrative board is supposed to have enough competence to appoint sustainability experts and has overall governance responsibilities for EFRAG for both pillars, the financial reporting pillar and the sustainability reporting pillar. I was the only person representing sustainability expertise, and the way it's labeled currently is civil society, a civil society seat. So that's what I was representing, and there was a coalition of us being sustainability experts that came together, many from civil society, but not exclusively, also from like leading sustainability banks, sustainability asset managers, B Corps, for example. Those that really have this in their DNA came together to kind of put forth a reform agenda for actually bringing sustainability expertise as a pillar on equal footing to the financial accounting expertise within EFRAG, which has not happened, but that has been formally requested. So watch this space to see if the European Union will actually do the necessary tasks to properly reform the governance of EFRAG so that it actually reflects this new mandate of sustainability expertise, and including and reflecting the diversity of the European people.
So is that something that's going to be decided in the next few days, as you mentioned, or is that a longer term issue?
So it would be up to the European Union to decide, and EFRAG leadership to decide. Right now, they have decided against any kind of reforming of the institution to reflect, those various aspects. So certain things, I think, will be brought forth, continue to be brought forth for change, but it is not a part of the ESRS content standards that will come out, I think, in the next few days. It will be vital, though, as EFRAG is tasked with maintaining standards, but also developing all of these sector-based standards, as well as adding to some of the cross-cutting standards. So it's not as if now this first set of ESRS standards are out and it's game over. No, there's a lot of work ahead, which dives even deeper into sustainability expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm already working with some companies who are trying to align their reporting with the ESRS. And obviously, there's lots and lots of pages of information, and companies are going to have to disclose on things that I think very often they're not used to. When it comes to the environment, yeah, they're used to disclosing on emissions and other things. But even, ESRS has much more clear guidelines on biodiversity and pollution, for example. And on social, again, maybe some HR issues companies are used to reporting on, but there's a lot more policies and targets and actions that they have to demonstrate. So for those companies who are starting that journey and, analyzing the ESRS and trying to align their reporting with it, what advice would you give them? Are there any resources that you'd recommend? Anything in particular?
So I would, if I, was a CEO of a company that now has to report for the ESRS, and let's say I'm a laggard, right? So I'm not a B Corp certified company. I think if you're a B Corp company already, you probably have
Sure.
a big head start, right? You've probably been tracking all these metrics already.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I'm a laggard, I'm a large laggard in the European system, CEO. I would ask for summaries and tools that make ESRS compliance easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask for free tools and free summaries for that. So that's something that I think the European Union has to pay for and democratize.
Right.
Because not all companies will be able to afford independent consultants and so on, especially at the levels that may be needed. And so I would go to the ESRS website, and if I don't see these tools and summaries available, I would call up the European Parliament representatives and the Council representatives and say, what is going on? You have to make this accessible and democratize the availability of this. So I think that that needs to happen. Of course, if you can afford a consultant or a consulting firm, by all means, reach out to Barbara. and
My expertise is not as good as yours on this one.
and others. I would also prioritize those that have been in sustainability for a long time and have the expertise, are credentialed. Again, look for that. There are, I think, a lot of newcomers to this space, and a lot of those that are painting themselves as sustainability experts. I would just be wary of that because there is some depth that's needed here, and there's nuance that's needed, and especially if the final set of standards that will come out or be finalized in the next few days represent how it's been released, how the drafts have been released, then there will be a need to do some kind of assessment. They call it a materiality assessment. I think that's a horrible word. No one knows what that means. I mean, but there will need to be some assessment of whether this metric is important enough for you to actually measure and comply. And so I gear towards being more conservative, meaning I would measure and disclose, even if I feel that this metric isn't as important as others, because what will likely happen is a number of legal cases and lawsuits and so on that will say, oh, you internally, you decided that it's not relevant for you or not material. Well, we think otherwise. So in the end, I just think it just causes more confusion by adding this whole materiality assessment. Unfortunately, I think that will be part of what's finalized, and now it's up to the company to decide. I think that actually is just a burden on companies. And so if I was a company CEO, I would just say, I'll just measure and disclose this because I just can't decide, right? It's just like, it shouldn't be up to me anyway to make those decisions because there's so much room for interpretation. And so I think that will be one of the biggest burdens and hurdles.
Yeah, this is kind of what I'm worried about because it's soon this deadline to have to report like this, and what I'm seeing in this organization that I'm working with, and where they're really trying to align with the ESRS, they're actually using it as an opportunity, the sustainability team, to raise to management where they're not disclosing, and they're actually thinking of doing a report this year where they literally say we don't know, this is what we don't have. Okay, this is what we do have, and then this is what we don't have. Which, if it works, I think it's very brave of them, because companies can often be very conservative. But I do wonder, if every company doesn't get it quite right, can they all be sued? I don't think so. So I really think it does need to be clearer exactly what it is, because I've read those standards, and it's not always. Sometimes it's super clear what they want, but other times it's not so easy for companies.
And it should be said that the technical experts had proposed a draft, ESRS, a draft European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which is not what the European Union ended up releasing as its draft for public comment, right? So there has been significant changes between what the experts have developed and what the political forces of the European Union have released.
Sure.
And the experts did prefer to go with clarity. Clarity being, here's what you just provide us. Provide the market with this information. Provide the public with this information, because investors and suppliers and lenders and customers all need this information to be able to value your company as a security, and to be able to determine how to purchase from your company, and so on and so forth. And that clarity has been diminished with the European Council, the political forces intervening and actually bringing more gray area, right? So I agree with you, and hopefully in future iterations of the ESRS, again, this will continue to be updated and also refreshed with and expanded for sectors and so on, that will be further clarified, and that things will be made mandatory, essentially.
Yeah, so I think maybe the message is, if you don't understand, you're not alone. This is still in development, but I think, the advice of, even if you don't disclose, start measuring. I think we're
Absolutely.
Even if you don't have to talk about it now, you're going to have to talk about it in the future. So it's best to be prepared rather than to be taken unaware when it comes to this.
Right.
So I'd like to talk to you more about your book, Sustainability at Work, which, full disclosure, I was interviewed for back in 2016. The book has been called a compelling guide for everyone who wants to have both a successful career and a career that makes a positive difference in society. So what was your motivation to write this book?
So I had an aha moment when I was working in a nuclear facility, a reprocessing facility for spent fuel, used nuclear waste. And I was speaking with a safety engineer during one of the kind of coffee tea breaks, because this was a plant that works all the time, 24 hours a day, all days of the year. And so I was working a night shift and speaking with a safety engineer about my background, what motivates me to do the work, and so on. And when I mentioned that I studied civil engineering, that was not an issue. But then when I mentioned that I also studied engineering for sustainable development, this fellow engineer was completely confused. Well, what does that have to do with this? And so on and so forth. And so I realized that the connection between pursuing this quadruple bottom line being social cohesion or equity, environmental ecological protection, economic well-being, and intergenerational well-being with one's career and job, where that intersection was completely missing or misunderstood for the masses. And so I got motivated to speak to a lot of people, including yourself, about this, and how sustainability motivates you, and how you've managed to incorporate it into your career trajectory, and how it's helped not only yourself and your own career, but also the company or organization within which you're working, and how actually, if we take a deeper dive, if we look at all sectors of our society. So healthcare, entertainment, media, business, finance, agriculture, you name the sector, how people are doing this on a daily basis, and they're finding not only purpose but profit, right? And so that was the aha moment, which triggered this kind of long journey to uncovering how actually, if we're going to even achieve the goals of sustainability, we can not only do it in our households, we have to bring it into the workplace and into the work itself.
Mm-hmm. I think, that's a message that resonates more strongly, I would say, in 2023 maybe than in 2016, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you say that this is then a good guide for people who want their business or organization to do more on sustainability? And if so, how can they use your book to do that?
Right, and I would say we've seen especially climate related careers accelerate in this period. In this 2023 period, in this decade, in a way that even brings home the message even more. So the book is organized by both having some overall kind of grounding frameworks for how to approach thinking and acting and incorporating sustainability into a job hunt, a career pivot, a leadership role, etc. And then it goes into the various sectors and includes narratives of various people, just to provide some practical examples. All kinds of stories, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of economy. So really, every continent is included in the book. Almost every type of career sector you can think of is included. I mean, there's not every single thing, but there's a lot, pretty comprehensive. And there's a framework that I use called the SURF framework, SURF, which stands for the supply chain, the end user or user of the product or service, relationships and relations for all the stakeholders that are involved, and then F is for future, or the future orientation or intergenerational equity, that for me definitely sets sustainability apart from other aspects of the economy or society or the environment. And so using that framework, kind of we tease apart, we being myself with who I've been interviewing for the stories, how their career and how their jobs and how their companies are all along that are pursuing this pathway to build a better future, essentially.
Wonderful. I believe there's a second edition coming out. Do you have a timeline on that?
Yes, so we are creating a second edition. The publisher and I myself have decided that it's a good time to update the book. We are also adding a chapter on climate-related careers and on JEDI, so justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, as a lens for sustainability and sustainability-related careers. And that should be out by summer 2024.
Wonderful. Look out for that, and not just because I might be in it again. It is genuinely a very good book, and it's very interesting to talk to Marilyn about these issues. So wonderful, Marilyn. To wrap up, I wanted to ask you. You also host a sustainability-related podcast. So can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, so I co-host China Clean Tech, and China Clean Tech is a podcast where we tell stories of the climate innovators, entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs that are China connected, mostly in China, but not exclusively, to the world, to the English speaking world or the English understanding world, because a lot of the content, of course, most of the content coming from China is in Mandarin Chinese, and it's not being made accessible for those who may be outside of China or those who do not speak Mandarin. And so we think that it's vital, especially at this juncture where there's so much misunderstanding in the English-speaking media about China, and we absolutely cannot solve climate change or build a sustainable future unless China is at the table. And so we're helping to bridge that gap.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Marilyn, for joining us today for part 2. And thanks to our listeners. So if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to this podcast series and explore the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. See you next time.